Hey guys, Matt, IronTrap Garage, and today we're going to be working on Sweet Heart Roadster again. So in our never-ending quest to customize this Roadster, we're moving our way back now that I got some of the work done on the doors and got some of the top of the door sill area, if you will, blending into the dash and some of that stuff done. I figured we'd jump to one I've been also looking to do for a really long time on top of the hinges. The other thing I really want to do since the beginning was dual antennas. So you guys know that I did the little remote radio, if you will, that's behind the seat here that'll get all upholstered around it. I wanted to put dual antennas. Again, with some of the cars that you saw in the late 50s, early 60s, some of the show car stuff you started seeing, and even guys that were building cars that were on the street that were copying the show cars, they were doing some of these things. So to go along with the trick radio setup, you gotta have dual antennas. They gotta be Frenched in. It's gotta be custom. So I've been looking at photos for a while now. I had a ton of photos saved on my phone of, just the tunneled or Frenched antennas and sculpted and all different stuff. Bill Hines did some incredible stuff over the years. That was kind of one of his trademark things, was the Frenched in antennas and all that. So I took kind of an idea from an old photo. I don't even remember what car it is. I have a close-up, but basically of an oval type opening that is sculpted around it, and then has the antennas in it with some metal, perforated metal or whatever that would go in to kind of cover everything. So it's in my head. We'll drop a photo maybe in there for my inspiration. That's what I'm kind of going to be using. So we're going to do the cutting right in here. I'm going to do a lot of it versus the old days where they would do 90% of it out of lead. They would just braze it in. I'm going to do most of it TIG welding in and actually finishing out and blending the welds. And then that way it only needs a little bit of lead or filler work in the end, and we're not sculpting the whole thing out of filler or lead. So let's get some wrecking devices out and start cutting this thing up. All right, so did a bunch of welding and just did some blending. Ended up using a little mini flap disc, like a 2-inch one. I've been using the crap out of this little battery-powered Milwaukee, just to save having a hose laying around. Works pretty good, but it's a little clunky when we get some of this detail work, but I was able to get it done. So I used the flap disc kind of on edge to create this like corner of the radius, how it flows up in there. And then I ended up taking one of these little 2-inch or sandpaper wheels, little cookies if you will, and I put that on edge and kind of bent it a little bit, and then I got that contour in there and just ran it around and around, and that smoothed everything out and really started blending it in. Now I just quickly hit it with the DA with like some 120 grit. So we got all of this in here. Only downside is this was all thin and pitted and whatever in here, and because it's so thin, it warped a little bit. I may have to cut this little piece out and weld it in. I can't really get to it easily because there's a brace in the trunk. It already was, I was trying to save it already. There's a couple little spots where there's like pinholes from rust and whatever. I made that whole back panel, if you guys don't remember, because it was all rotted and pitted, so I may need to repair that. I didn't get crazy with trying to fix that dent. There was a little bit of warpage that I kind of roughed out here, and we can spend a little more time with hammer and dolly once we get further. So now that I got this in here, it's looking pretty cool, sculpted, whatever. Now we want to see if we're going to leave this piece of metal here or not. So what we're going to end up doing is I have this perforated metal that was laying around. I used some of this to make like a fan shroud on the T, and it looks pretty cool. Very much like our reference photo. This is just real thin stuff, looks pretty cool. Very common to use in customs and show rods back in the 50s and 60s. So I'm going to cut a piece of that just to visually look at it and kind of push it down in here. What I'm hoping is we can leave this original metal here in the quarter, drill 2 little holes for the antennas to come up through, so we're not hurting the structural integrity of the quarter, so we don't have to worry about it getting floppy around the edges. And then we can just put that piece of metal in. It'll hide that, and then we just have 2 little holes through everything where the antennas will come up, and then I just have to make some brackets that will either spot weld underneath here or into the quarter or into the trunk bracing. Not sure yet, but that's kind of the first thing I wanted to do, is get the look going there, and then helps me make the decision on what we're doing with the antenna. So we're going to start with 2 small holes so we can kind of push it up there and hold it with clamps and magnets, and then we'll see what we like as we go along. All right, so I got some spots drawn out that symmetrically, is that a word, symmetrically?
It is now. You just said it, didn't you?
Yeah. As far as symmetrical goes, I don't know what I'm saying. Words are leaving my mouth. That where these spacing should be. So that's roughly what I have there. And I think I kind of like that.
That looks good. I like that.
And then I was thinking, then we have a little bit of room if we want to do kind of like that photo, or we were talking about replicate the little stars in the gauges and put a little tiny like emblem there or something that would follow through.
That would give you enough room for that, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's kind of cool. Now, I may be so busy that I may not want to do that when we get it all together, but I think that spacing works whether you put something between it or not.
Yeah.
I think that'll be cool, and just mount them just below the surface like that.
Yeah, it's nice and symmetrical. It'll look right. Yep.
So I guess I'll measure and make a hole that's just bigger than this largest part of the antenna.
Oh, right. Yeah, just get that up in there.
So just the antenna will fit through. This will not.
Mm-hmm.
like that. I wonder if in that car in the photo, they sunk it down enough that you could take this threaded part and thread it into the quarter.
Maybe.
And then you wouldn't even have to really have brackets because it would be sturdy enough that it probably wouldn't, especially these ones, these are so light.
Right.
But I don't think unless I machined a new cap, or I machined this one, that probably wouldn't work. I think this is quite tall, the threads. I have to measure that depth, what that is.
You could probably take that whole ball off now and just use a
Yeah, but that makes it
washer or
even.
something.
Yeah, that's true. Ooh.
Oh,
Oh, that's not supposed to happen.
no, that's supposed to stay in. That's a
Yeah, that's the
keeps
keeper.
it tight.
So if we could just, if it was sunken enough that, I guess like you said, you could put spacers to keep the threads down.
Well, what does it look like if you pull that off?
Yeah, so we could just have, if I made a nut or I machined this one down enough, maybe if I just got rid of all that like tower section, although that might be what catches that. You probably need that.
Right, because yeah, it'll catch the top corner
Yeah.
there to keep the stuff inside.
Well, if I made a nut that was thinner and was just stayed flush there, that was more of like a flat nut, then you could get away with that because you could just tighten this down and just get rid of like all this depth and just put the little nut part all the way at the top and then space it all so that it's down.
Yep.
Then it could stay underneath there. You put your mesh across and you might work. That would be kind of handy.
Yeah, I
All right,
think
so I need to cut, probably need to drill whatever that
right. You had to
last
have
little bit is.
a really exact size.
That one right there.
Yeah.
Making it look cool is number one.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'm gonna drill some holes and wreck this thing some more.
Excellent. Throw this in here.
Yeah, that's fine.
Excellent.
All right, we got our first one in. It's looking pretty cool. So what we ended up doing, I just for now literally have just some kind of nut that just barely fits over. I think it's 7/16 fine thread. It's perfect.
The head nut. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a flathead head nut. It all comes around.
Yep.
It all comes full circle.
We have about 1,000 of those.
Yeah,
Yeah, we use them for everything.
Yeah, they work well. So this tightens down, and the little recess or little step down in the nut actually is perfect. It kind of seats it in the hole, and you can tighten everything down against that spacer. It's nice and tight. I think we may, I mean, it has a little wiggle. Probably do want to put some kind of little brace just so over time it's not,
Yeah, it doesn't work itself loose or.
or just crack the, paint or bodywork. They're so light, I don't think they would, but. So the real question is, where's my little key? We were saying taller in the front.
I think so. I think it looks swoopier.
Yeah. So I think that piece is going to end up being something like. I don't want them sticking up much because it's a little roadster, so you really don't want it like.
That's enough there.
Something like that.
I think so.
That looks spacey. It's so Jetsons. I love it.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I like that. That's like, it very reminds me of the Jetsons type. And that's the arrow we're going for here, is that space age kind of. Yeah, that's cool. Now the only question I have is, do I want to somehow make it so these are more straight up and down?
I was thinking that.
Or do I leave them on the plane that the quarter panel is in? Because right now they're sitting on the same plane as the quarter panel, but I kind of wonder if they should be straight even though it doesn't match the quarter panel. That's kind of like, yeah, that caught my eye initially, that it's kind of, they're at an
I
angle.
was thinking the same thing.
And now that would just be a matter of making a little spacer that is, you know,
just a wedge spacer.
Yeah, a wedge spacer that would make it sit over. I mean, I get that it matches the angle of the quarter panel, but I feel like it should be.
Yeah, I feel like most of the time they were probably straight up.
Straight, yeah. So I think I need to tackle that next. Can't even really pick it up on camera, but yeah. So yeah, I think we need to figure out a way, either that or I can manipulate maybe the sheet metal here.
I was thinking just hammer and dolly a little bit.
Yeah, I might be able to hammer and dolly and stretch it so that it brings it down a little bit, and that would maybe solve it. Whichever one works, I don't know.
Maybe you can just get a little out of each.
It wouldn't take much,
No.
just a little bit. But yeah, I think that's the next thing. But before I cut the expanded metal,
Yeah.
I think we get that sitting how we like it, and then we can put that in. But I love
I
just
think that looks cool. It's
looks
as
cool.
hell.
Yeah, man, that's freaking awesome. I love it. So we're gonna fix the angle here, get the antennas so they're pointing more vertical and not on the plane of the quarter panel, and then we can move from there. All right, first one's looking decent. That's the real test here. We said tall one to the front, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. That one's a little off. But... Oh, there we go. That was easy enough. All right, this is awesome. Steve and I were just looking at this, and it's probably hard to pick up on the camera, but it looks really cool. Really, really psyched on it. We ended up, like you guys saw in that shot, we were heating around. I put a bigger washer than the area of the antennas so that we could heat around them and then just tweak the metal and kind of get the big area around where the antennas sit to position them in how we wanted. So we got them all sitting pretty good. And one thing we did is we ended up pulling them straight so that they were, when we mounted them initially, they were actually sitting like out like this, because that was just the angle of the quarter panel. So we ended up bringing them back up so they were more vertical, but then we noticed right before we started bending them that they naturally had a little bit of a downhill kind of slope that matches obviously the quarter panel. So after we got done heating everything, I just went back and tweaked it a little bit and got both of them just a couple degrees angled back. And I think with the windshield frame being angled back, everything kind of flowing, it looks cool. Just looks, like I always say, looks fast sitting still, which is kind of one of the goals with hot rods for sure. So got that in there. What I'm going to do now is pull these back out by sinking this down in that edge of that nut, the lower part of it, into the surface. It basically got this hex area down below the ridge. So basically we can hide that with our metal that we're going to put in, and hopefully that'll sit on top of the hex portion to hide that, and all we'll see is this little chrome kind of nub sticking up through. So I think that'll actually even be a slightly nicer look than the one I was using for reference. So I'm going to take the antennas out, make a paper pattern so we can get a nice size and shape that we need for that, and where the holes need to be. And then I got my piece here, which is quite large, so I can mess up a bunch of times, and trace that onto here, punch the holes in it, and then we will kind of push it down in there, and that'll be our look, and we'll pretty much be done. Alright, so I got everything welded in. I ended up cutting out this little piece of the bead here, which was really thin and ended up warping on me from the heat. I tried stud gunning it, and it ended up with the stud welder just blowing a hole in it because it was like paper thin. So I cut it out, made a little bead. It still has a couple of little lows that I need to pick up, but it's and there's a couple of little spots here, but it's roughed in pretty good. I could spend some time another time working these quarter panels and getting a lot of the damage and other issues worked on in it. But for now, this part of the project is done. Really psyched on it. We spent a ton of time, Steve and I, just kind of discussing what angle to make the antennas. Do we lean them back a little bit? And as we were tweaking everything, I think we kind of nailed it. So they have a slight rake back to kind of give that going fast, sitting still look like the windshield kind of gives you, but it isn't like crazy angled or anything in your face, but when you stand back you can kind of see it. So happy with that. We ended up tweaking them to get them to come in and be basically like straight versus how they were sitting in the quarter panel naturally. They were kind of leaning out. So I think all of those choices were the right one, and that just subtle little sculpting around it will be pretty cool when everything's all done and body work done and stuff. I think it's going to look really, really slick. It looks slick now. So nice little modification that I've been dreaming about doing since basically before I even had this car, I was thinking about doing some of these things. So really, really cool. So next couple of projects on this thing's probably going to be back to a little bit of boring stuff. I got to work on getting the trunk lid to hinge and then cutting and modifying the deck lid skin to get a gap top to bottom and around top sides and the top and bottom to get everything to gap and hinge, which is I've not been looking forward to, but it needs to be done. We're kind of working our way back on the car, and that's really the next big offensive thing that doesn't really fit or work on the car. So we're going to tackle that as one of the next projects probably in the video, and hopefully it'll be helpful for anybody that's looking to do that on their car. So that is the next modification on Sweet Heart Roadster. Let me know down below in the comments what you think of this little mod. I think this is going to be another one that there's going to be some discussion about in the comments, which is always interesting to read and interact with. So thank you guys for following. Appreciate it. Catch you later.